In December 1976, postman Nigel Rossiter arrived at a remote farmhouse in West Wales on a blustery Saturday morning. During his first week on the job, he noticed a few letters that were still on the porch floor, where he had delivered them a few days earlier. His insides burned so much that he set off the alarm. As a result, the body of a guy with severe burns and his seriously injured sister were found. After the official account of events was contested by the family nearly half a century later. Dyfpoas police is now conducting a forensic assessment to determine whether to reopen the case. Nigel, who was 19 at the time, described what transpired as follows: "I started shouting, 'Hello, anybody here?' I noticed a burning, smoky stench emanating from the chimney as soon as I entered the door. At that moment, he noticed Griff Thomas's severely burned body on the kitchen floor, resting in a heap of blackened rubble. Griff was 73 years old. When the police came, they found a second horrific scene inside the home. With significant head injuries, the body of Griff's sister Martha Mary, also known as Patty, was slumped on a magazine rack in the living room corner. Patty was standing next to an overturned television and chairs that had been thrown over. The room was filled with the sound of static as it remained turned on. Patty, 70, had died from beatings. Now a murder scene, the farmhouse of Finan Sampson stood half a mile outside the settlement of Langleman in Easter, Pembrokeshire. Detectives came to the conclusion that Griff had probably killed his sister in a fit of rage during a fight over money a little more than a month later. However, after almost 50 years, the siblings' surviving friends, family, and neighbors are still having trouble understanding the police's version of events. The father of Griff and Patty's cousin, who Absalom stated, "There's no way Griff could have smashed the furniture. There was no way he could have hurt Patty that badly." Griff, who has known this guy his entire life, through thick and thin, has been labeled as the murderer of his own sister and gone to his grave for it. It's not fair and it's not right. In response to calls for a reopening of the case, Dyfpoas officers declared in October 2022 that it will conduct a forensic examination of the evidence collected by officers at the time in order to determine whether more advanced methods could shed further light on the events that transpired. Operation Hallam, the review, is still in progress, and a new BBC podcast called Death on the Farm is delving into the half-century-old case. According to Mr. Absalom, he had requested that the review team think about excavating the bodies so that they might be inspected using contemporary forensic methods. "Forensics has moved on so much since the 70s, I'm sure they'd be able to look at them now in a new light," he said. As word of the tragedy went around the tight-knit community in December 1976, Dyfpoas police established an incident room in the center of the village and opened a double murder investigation. Det.Ch. Supt Pat Malloy, a renowned detective who had cracked the infamous Cannock Chase murder cases, was leading the case. Police officers knocked on doors within a 5-mile radius, speaking with approximately 1,200 individuals. In the ensuing weeks, 572 men gave police explanations that excluded them from the probe. However, after Christmas passed and the new year began, no leads surfaced. Thus, the investigation's focus changed. When January 1977 came to an end, Det.Ch. Supt Malloy made his decision. Before beginning a fire in which he lay down to die, he declared that Griff had probably killed his sister, possibly by striking her over the head with a kitchen chair. This situation was inexplicable to anyone who had known the siblings all their lives. Mr. Absalom, who was 15 years old and grew up close, recalls how their deaths caused a shockwave in the neighborhood. "I never heard of any falling out between them, not even a mild argument," he claimed. These were God-fearing people, chapel was everything to them. The siblings were prominent members of the neighboring Ridwilliam Chapel and well liked and respected in the community. Up to his passing in 1967, both had resided at Finan Sampson with their aging father. They ran the farm until the 1970s, at which point they retired and started renting out acreage. From what my father said about the scene, he felt it was physically impossible that he had done it, said Ngibby, whose father Emlyn was also a cousin of the siblings. There was no way Griff could have done it, and he carried that belief with him throughout his life and until his passing. Many people in the community share this opinion. They cite case details that, in the opinion of many, call into question chapel Molloy's conclusions. It is thought that Griff and Patty passed away that evening on Tuesday, December 7th, after Griff was last seen in the afternoon at the neighborhood store, Charing Cross. In the living room, there were 2 half-drunk cups of tea along with a platter of bread, butter, and crisps, which led to rumors that there had been another visitor that night. When Griff passed away, the newspaper and cheese he had purchased from the store were still in his jacket pocket. A significant amount of Griff's blood was discovered within Patty's sewing machine, and the cover was changed. However, a portion of a left fingerprint discovered in the blood on the cover remained unidentified. Locals claimed their sheepdog, who was known to bark whenever someone came to the farm, had drowned in the farmyard well after going missing. However, the police report makes no mention of this. Most importantly, there was always the question of whether Griff, who was arthritic and feeble, could have physically performed the acts for which he was charged. Griff was a stick user on the farm, suffered from spinal curvature, and had claw-like hands that hindered his dexterity. Sitting next to Griff in chapel, he often wouldn't be able to find the page in the hymn book because of his hands, so I'd help him, said Mr. Absalom. One time he dropped his glasses and couldn't grasp them to pick them up. He could not have killed her in that manner. She was bludgeoned unconscious either physically or emotionally. Looking through the evidence, it just doesn't add up. The possibility that a third party killed the siblings was deemed so remote as to be discounted by chapel Molloy in his report. However, he also conceded that their histories offered no explanation for such a violent deed. Many think that when Griff came home from the shop, he startled an intruder who was abusing Patty, possibly someone they knew who was extorting money from them. They left behind £35,000 in savings and investments, and after their deaths, more than £2,000 in cash was discovered in the farmhouse, demonstrating their seeming wealth. Patty Thomas received a verdict of unlawful killing from a jury inquest held in Haverfordwest on February 17, 1977, while Griff received an open verdict. After only 10 weeks of their deaths, the case was concluded. However, throughout the years, there have been increasing efforts to clear Griff's reputation, notably those made by the local newspaper Cleveland. Its editor, Heath and Wynne, said, "Many were convinced someone else, a third party, was involved in the deaths, but people had no influence or authority to challenge the police version of events. Back then, people accepted authority more readily. The community held the Thomases in the highest regard." Pat Molloy attempted to imply that they were reticent and often quarreling, but the evidence doesn't support that. As a youngster, Denzel Davies worked occasionally at the Finan Sampson farm. He stated, "Police said they'd interviewed everyone during their inquiry, but neither my friends nor I were interviewed." Without a doubt, the community would have objected and demanded more investigation if this decision had been made today. However, we would never have confronted them if we had disagreed with them. Resting side by side in the Ridwillan Chapel Cemetery, Griff and Patty Thomas are buried with a view of the verdant valley and River Cleda, where their baptism took place. The fight to clean Griff's name continues for Absalom. However, he acknowledges that there may not be much longer to find out the truth about what actually transpired at Finan Sampson. We are not in control of time. Nearing 50 years has passed since all this happened, and the number of people who knew them is dwindling every year, he said. I had to pass by Griff and Patty's grave in order to get to my parents' burial. Every time, I go over and speak to them and say that I'm still fighting the cause. In a statement, Dythpois Police stated that the case's forensic review was examining the evidence from the initial investigation in light of contemporary forensic methods to determine whether any new evidence might be obtained. A spokeswoman said, "The timeframe for conclusion of the review is not known at this stage, however, this work is very much ongoing. We continue to keep the family informed about our efforts and maintain regular communication with them."